This is Monty once again from DPL Surveillance Equipment. Back at it again, except today is my day off from doing much at all, except doing my minor chores. And I had a pretty good workout yesterday at the gym. So Thursdays I usually relax and take it easy and not do too much at all. So just finished wiping down my car and just reviewing a few things that are going on. Before I forget, it looks like Nike is indeed benefiting more than a lot of the naysayers had expected. I think a lot of the people who got caught up in the Kaepernick-Nike issue and whether or not Kaepernick was patriotic or not versus what Nike was doing with their partnership with Kaepernick, I think they totally missed the point. Mainly because Nike is a business, and Kaepernick, was making a political statement, more or less, and with Nike's role is totally different as compared to what Kaepernick is all about. But nonetheless, Nike benefited, and the stock is going up, and the company's doing well now. Sales are going up dramatically, and everything looks good for that company. And Kaepernick is probably going to get even more endorsements. So for those of you out there, you armchair warriors who probably never even served an hour in the service, the armed services, you probably should rethink what it means to either put your body at risk playing a contact sport like football or something like that for a living. And in addition to, you may want to consider what it means to be actually in the armed services and putting yourself in harm's way. Because not enough people are actually as intimately involved as they would like you to believe when they wake up Monday morning with a whole lot of rhetoric that they want to add to a conversation where they have no actual experience. So having gotten that off my chest, just want to say that today is a nice sunny day again in Camarillo, California, and not a whole lot on my agenda for today. Again, I'm just going to relax, take a nap later on after I eat breakfast, and take it easy, and take care of some miscellaneous things with the business or whatever. But overall, life is good. Can't complain. Excellent health. Finances look good thanks to cryptocurrencies and bitcoins, such as Bitcoin, and the top 4 or 5, and a few others that are thrown into my portfolio. Excuse the noise. I think I'm staying well informed in the markets. Getting a lot of time to get caught up on my reading and studying and everything. With such as reading the Wall Street Journal, making sure I stay listening to Bloomberg Finances and such. So, life is good, can't complain. Family's doing great. Decent vacations coming up in the very near future, and more to follow after that. What else is going on? Well, my name is Monty Henry. I'm owner of DPL Surveillance Equipment. We run a full-service surveillance and security equipment company. We have lifetime guarantees and warranties in all the products, 24/7, 365 tech sales and customer support. We have perhaps the largest inventory of items that not only can you buy, but you can rent or lay away as well. Extremely large video library, articles directory, podcasts, blogs, you name it. The multimedia center is just growing and expanding every day with good information, free information. We accept cryptocurrencies in the shopping cart on our website, such as Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum, Bcash, etc. What else? Website is totally redesigned. It looks good, works fine. It's too bad people can't figure out how to use it. At the thousands of dollars worth of investment in the website, I'm still getting calls. People asking me, where are you? Do you have a physical store? And I haven't been to your website, but I thought, your phone number fell out of the sky, and I thought I'd call you. Meanwhile, Jeff Bezos and Amazon and other people, Warren Buffett, are making billions of dollars off of people who are quite comfortable with, obviously, patronizing their websites, patronizing their businesses, and I can't quite figure out why it takes me 15 phone calls to sell a $300 product. And they insist that I try to take the order over the phone versus placing it on the website. Insane times we live in, very insane times. I guess the idea of building they will come is a lot of bullshit, probably, huh? What else is going on? I have to do my typical banter about MasterCard and Visa and American Express and Discover and those guys ripping us off. For those of you who are halfway educated, make sure you understand that get away from Visa, get away from MasterCard. Don't give in to the rewards points. I just did an article yesterday, a podcast and an article. It's on my website about customers loving rewards points and merchants hating it. Merchants get charged a lot of money for processing these stupid prestige cards, whereby customers get 1 or 2 or 3% cash back or rewards or something, and instead of using Bitcoin and getting rewards in cryptocurrencies, or instead of expediting the downfall of the vampires in the traditional finance industry, what do people do? They feed into it. Then they complain about how tough life is for them as far as them getting ahead financially, while at the same time they feed into the system. They give money to the banks, give money to MasterCard and Visa, give money to the merchant processors and the credit card issuers and everyone. It's kind of weird times we live in. Anyway, what is today's article all about? It's kind of long, drawn out. See how far we can get into it before somebody tries to interrupt me. Farmers, let's see. Today's article is all about farmers say aid won't cover tariff damage. Again, farmers say aid won't cover tariff damage. USDA has begun making payments to farmers affected by trade conflicts. The Trump administration has started compensating U.S. farmers for damage tariffs are doing to their business. Many farmers say the payments won't make up for lost sales to China and other foreign markets they were counting on to buy huge amounts of crops and meat being produced across the Farm Belt. Bumper corn and soybean harvests and record pork production have pushed down prices for agricultural commodities. U.S. farm income is expected to drop 13% this year to $66 billion, according to the Department of Agriculture, extending a years-long slump in the agricultural economy. The USDA in August said it would pay farmers nearly $5 billion to offset losses from global trade disputes. Major U.S. trade partners, including China, Canada, and Mexico, have applied tariffs to billions of dollars worth of U.S. agricultural products in retaliation for tariffs imposed by Washington. The U.S. and China vowed last week to put more tariffs on each other's goods. The USDA said it has paid $35 million to farmers so far, especially in Iowa, Kansas, Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin. Nearly 49,000 farmers have applied for aid. Mike Paustian, an Iowa pork producer who sells some 30,000 pigs annually, expects to receive about $40,000, depending upon the size of his crops. Mr. Paustian said he could receive another $20,000 for his 14 acres of corn and soybeans. In recent years, a farm of that size could make $4 million in annual sales on the livestock alone. Mr. Paustian said he appreciates what he sees as a goodwill gesture from the Trump administration, but he said he worries the trade fights will close doors to American pork and other farm goods while the world's appetite for meat is actually growing. This payment isn't going to save anybody's life, Mr. Paustian said. It'll soften the blow a little bit. Prices for lean hogs have fallen 19% since the end of May. Mr. Haag, an Illinois hog farmer who raises roughly 17,000 pigs each year, estimates he is eligible for roughly $32,000 in aid, enough to pay for a few weeks of animal feed, he says. And an additional $20,000 he expects to get for his corn and soybeans will cover one tractor payment. I think most farmers are trying to support the president and what he's doing, but it is painful, said Mr. Haag. There's a lot of extra pork out there. Trade-related losses to the U.S. pork industry are expected to total more than $2 billion this year, said Iowa State University economist Dermot Hayes. Divvying up. The Trump administration is making payments to U.S. farmers to help soften the blow of damaging tariffs. The U.S. has pledged direct payments of $290 million to pork producers to offset those losses. The agency has also promised to purchase $559 million worth of pork under a related program that farmers and economists say could boost prices in the pork market. USDA officials have said a second wave of payments to farmers could be announced in December if trade disruptions persist. During a Senate hearing on trade earlier this month, U.S. lawmakers criticized the aid package and pushed the Trump administration to make progress on trade agreements. It's nothing more than a Band-Aid, said Senator John Thune, Republican of South Dakota. We need to open up markets. Greg Dowd, Chief Agricultural Negotiator for the Office of the United States Trade Representative, said during the hearing the administration is working hard to renegotiate North American Free Trade Agreement, seeking to improve bilateral trade with China and exploring potential partnerships in Southeast Asia and Africa. The White House referred a request for comment to the USDA, which has said the aid isn't intended to make farmers whole, but rather to provide short-term relief while the Trump administration works to secure long-term trade deals that benefit the entire economy, including agriculture. Adding to the concerns is the likelihood that the Congress will miss a Sunday deadline to pass a new 5-year farm bill, which funds agricultural and nutritional programs. Without new legislation, major programs governing food stamps and crop insurance remain intact, but funding will lapse for dozens of smaller programs, including those that promote U.S. farm goods overseas. Farmers applying for federal relief payments must certify the size of the crops they raised this season, their hog herds this summer, or annual milk production for a recent year. Local USDA offices will audit some of these claims. The USDA under Secretary Bill Northey said in an interview, "We tried to make this easy and straightforward," said Mr. Northey, adding that many farmers won't be able to apply for the aid until the fall harvest is finished. Trouble is particularly acute in the dairy industry. U.S. dairy farmers will see their income slide $1.5 billion this year due to tariffs from China and Mexico, according to a forecast by agribusiness consulting firm Informa Economics. Milk prices are lower than production costs for many farmers, said Jim Biggs, who milks 60 Jersey cows in Wisconsin. Mr. Biggs said the $700 check he is expected from the USDA will pay 1 month's electricity bill for his dairy barn. He is struggling to keep up with his bills for feed and veterinary services. Tom Gissel, a Kansas wheat farmer, said he fears the downturn will push older farmers to retire, continuing a trend and consolidation in the U.S. agriculture that has left fewer and bigger farms. Mr. Gissel, 65, who farms 3,000 acres of wheat, corn, and sorghum, said he should receive about $5,000 for his wheat, 10% of the cost to fertilize the next crop he is planting this fall. He will get just $10 for his 41 acres of corn, less than a tank of gas. I could put that in my pickup truck and go a little ways, but it won't get me very far, he said. Next session, you guys. As you can tell, this first session is very, very grim in that it seems like there's been a steady decline in the agricultural business overall for the United States. It seems like a lot of these farmers are just not up to the competition, as far as I can tell, what I'm reading. They are giving in, planting less acreage, and basically throwing up the white flag, basically, it sounds like, Let's read further and see why I'm making that claim. Struggling U.S. farmers worry about a resurgent Russia. Russian wheat exports are booming despite a crushing price slump as the country's farmers finally emerge from decades of neglect. Atradnya, Russia. Vladimir Mishurov transformed the remnants of the Lenin's Path collective farm in this village into a profitable business. He also helped make Russia the world's largest wheat exporter for the first time since the last years of the SARS. Over the past decade or so, Mr. Mosharov replaced his aging Russian equipment with a dozen high-tech machines from John Deere and other makers, and started using powerful new fertilizers and seeds. He bought and rented more acres from neighbors and family, eventually reaching about 3,600, taking advantage of Russia's overall low prices for land. And as many farmers do in the United States, he often works days on end with no sleep, or with little sleep, especially during the harvest. The major difference between Mr. Musharraf and a farmer on America's Great Plains, the Russia's costs are lower and mostly in rubles, making his overseas sales priced in dollars immensely more valuable. Amid a multi-year brutal slump in grain prices, Russian agriculture is thriving. The country exported more than 40 million tons of wheat in the year ending June, around 50% more than the previous year, and the highest level for any country in the past quarter century. Russia overtook the United States as the world's largest or the world's biggest exporter of wheat in 2016, and again beat the United States in 2018. The growing Russian competition is one more pressure point threatening American farming, which is facing the biggest wave of farm closures in the United States since the 1980s. A global oversupply of grain has pushed prices down to around half the level in 2012, when prices peaked, making it difficult to turn a profit in dollars. So again, this signals that the American farmers looks like they're losing a lot of ground in the United States, and they need to get their act together. Otherwise, we're going to be eating everything exported from somewhere else. And as you know as well as I do, the quality of everyone else's food isn't the same as compared to you growing it yourself. Moving right along. New farm power. Russia has overtaken the United States as the world's largest exporter of wheat, as the overall global grain market has expanded. U.S. trade disputes with China and other countries could make Russian wheat even more attractive. If big buyers apply retaliatory tariffs to U.S. grains, China has added a 25% tariff on U.S. wheat, but Chinese restrictions on imports from Russia have prevented Moscow from taking advantage yet, according to Swithan Steele, director at Switzerland-based Solaris Commodities SA, which trades Russian grain. For now, it's not the trade war; it's economics that is helping Russian wheat compete. Even in places close to the United States, such as Mexico, Mr. Steele said Russian quality got better and it's cheaper. Russian farmers come out ahead when export earnings are converted into rubles. Since the Russian currency has depreciated, a dollar now converts to twice as many rubles as it did in 2014. Russia has a similar advantage against the euro and other currencies. Russian farmers can cover their costs at home to keep planting and also undercut Western competitors on the price. Russia's surge of agriculture exports, including grain, fish, meat, is part of an effort to diversify the economy away from crude oil. Oil and natural gas were once the source of half the federal budget revenues, with oil prices still down 25% from their high in 2014, recovering from a swoon of more than 60%. Exports now account for around 40% of budget revenues. Given the fall in prices for oil, grain has come to the fore. Grain is our oil. Then Agricultural Minister Alexander Chekhov said in 2016, less expensive Russian wheat is pushing U.S. and European grain out of import-dependent countries in the Middle East and North Africa, where the Kremlin has made a military and diplomatic push for influence in recent years. Agriculture exports at $20.7 billion in 2017 have overtaken the arms industry as Russia's number 2 earner. Wheat makes up about a quarter of the total. Russia harvested an area of wheat almost twice as large as the United States in the year ended June, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture. American farmers, seeing little opportunity to profit, planted the smallest area of wheat since records began a century ago. U.S. wheat production shrank 25% in the year. So I think this is pretty pathetic. Just because you're getting competition from Russia, you actually plant less crops. In other words, you're conceding. I mean, I understand that Russia harvested an area of wheat almost twice as large as the United States in the year ended June. I understand that perfectly well. But at the same time, if you are planting less crops, less agricultural crops, you are conceding defeat. You're basically giving in. I think we need to get these people who own these farming companies and businesses out of the way and get some more fresh minds in there, some minorities, get some blacks, get some women in there, something, or black women or whatever, so we can figure out how the slaves were forced to make America so great as compared to how nowadays modern farmers are throwing up the flag and giving up. That's pretty pathetic. Moving right along. Mr. Musharov's farm is on the fertile steppe of southern Russia. This area is the country's biggest grain producer, a bread basket known for its mineral-rich black earth and mild climate. Now 46 years old, he spent his late teens and early 20s driving a bone-rattling tractor that needed its motor refurbished every year and left his hands calloused. A lack of cash meant workers were paid in sacks of flour, wheat, or sugar, and drunkenness was pervasive. At the start of the 20th century, Russia had been the world's largest exporter of wheat. The Soviets killed and imprisoned millions, including many of the most successful farmers, as part of an effort to install a system of collective farming that proved inefficient. By the 1970s, the Soviet Union had to import grain. Collective farms stumbled on after the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, often still managed by the same bosses without business smarts or cash to invest. No one was in charge, said Mr. Musharov. They couldn't adapt to the market economy. They were accustomed to unthinkingly following instructions. Farmhands worked to pass the time of day until they could go home, said Andrei Burden, a farmer from a nearby village who works land that was once part of the dawn of communism collective farm. Farming was at a dead end. Russia opened the land market at the end of the 1990s, but new investors and their managers tended to be far from the land and adverse to risk, farmers said. Mr. Musharov, who worked as chief agronomist at a large farming conglomerate, recalled telling an executive in the early 2000s that using pesticide could increase the barley crop by around a quarter. No, Vova. It's enough already, he said, the executive replied, using a nickname. Why should I persuade someone to earn more money, Mr. Musharov said. He struck out on his own in the mid-2000s. At first, he pooled land with relatives and used whatever equipment he could lay his hands on. Today, he grows wheat, barley, beets, corn, sunflowers, peas, and other crops. Gains in output. Russia wheat farmers have modernized techniques and added higher quality machinery to improve yields, coming close to those on U.S. farms. With vastly more acres under cultivation, overall Russian production beats U.S. output. Mr. Berdan, 43, started farming around 250 acres in 2005 with a dilapidated tractor and planter. He invested early profits into more efficient vehicles and better fertilizers and expanded territory by renting from neighbors. When we made the first money, I didn't buy a Mercedes or an apartment, he said. I put it into the next season. At first, he bought Russian equipment, but later upgraded to John Deere tractors and combines, which the Russians call Zelenoya Technica, or green machines. Mr. Berdan said he tested a John Deere combine against a Russian one and found it produced about one-third more grain from the same area. He also added a planter from Sweden's Verstad AB that shoots seeds into the ground at the optimal depth and intervals, improving yields. He now farms about 3,700 acres. In April, while loading the planter with seed, Mr. Berdan joked with farmhands about equipment. In the old days, He recalled working with a pesticide sprayer that would soak him with chemicals. He said he could only work for about 4 hours at a time before giving up out of fear for his health. Now his sprayer can measure how much pesticide to spray and where, keeping costs down. The price of land in the region where Messrs. Misheroff and Berdan live is significantly lower than for many foreign rivals. On average, farmland in Romania, a European Union member of the Black Sea, is nearly 3 times the price, while farmland in Iowa and Kansas is more than 5 times the price, according to a 2017 survey by Moscow-based Sovicon, which provides consulting services, analysis, and forecasts on Russian agriculture. Mr. Berdan said Russian seeds and fertilizers still cost less than Western brands, even though they have improved significantly in recent years. He buys wheat seeds from a state-run agricultural institute and can plant the seeds produced from those plants the next season. Many American farmers use expensive, high-yield, patented seeds from companies such as Bayer, AG, or Dow-DuPont, which don't allow the produced seeds to be planted, requiring farmers to buy fresh seeds annually. And this is the most stupid thing imaginable. I understand that farmers may not be perceived as the sharpest knives in the cutlery in the cutlery block, but come on, you guys. If you're buying seeds from Bayer, AG, or Dow-DuPont, they're patented, and they're telling you can't plant them, you must be insane. Okay, I published an article a few years ago where a number of farmers who were buying genetically modified seeds, they finally realized if they can grow organic crops, sell it to into the Whole Foods markets, the industry where you actually are looking for natural organic crops, you can make a lot of money. That's the new gold for farmers. It's not GMO. It's not patented seeds. So you guys need to wake up. Transport costs are also low for the region. It is close to the Black Sea ports, and gasoline costs are much lower than the Western Union. Mr. Berdan and Mr. Misheroff run their own fleets of trucks that move grain to the Novorossiysk port, some 200 miles away by road. Private and state-owned companies have modernized grain terminals in recent years and increased their capacities. Farmers can use an app on a smartphone to book a slot for their trucks to deliver grain, rather than the old system of having trucks wait in line for days. Bumper harvests are stretching infrastructure. Windows for unloading grain are snapped up quickly, and farmers are often assigned slots several days after a requested time, Mr. Berdan said. Exports could have been even higher if they could figure out how to load more, he said. Russia has made it a priority. President Vladimir Putin ordered officials to tackle infrastructure bottlenecks that are holding back exports. In inland areas, large distances and a lack of train cars and storage silos hamper grain from reaching external markets. One of Russia's largest terminals in Novorossiysk is completing a 3-year modernization this year that will nearly double its capacity. Other companies have announced plans to build or expand terminals on the Black Sea, the Baltic Sea in the north and in the Far East. Officials said expansions at ports could increase export capacity of grains by 50% to 7.5 million tons a month by 2020. Government officials tout the importance of state subsidies, including inexpensive loans to help farmers replace old equipment. Analysts and farmers say the state's efforts to support agriculture have been hit and miss. Subsidies often make their way to well-connected companies. Investment in infrastructure has been slow, and bureaucrats and other officials often expect bribes. Farmers received the freedom to do business in the way they thought most efficient, said Andrei Sizov, Jr., managing director of Sovicon. The role of the state was quite muted in the last 10 years, and that was good for the industry. Giant agro-holdings, conglomerates often created by wealthy tycoons or people close to the top federal and regional government officials, have built up spreads that dwarf Western farms. Individual farms larger than 250,000 acres or nearly 400 square miles account for around 13% of all land farmed in Russia, according to Mr. Sizov. Mr. Misheroff now now can afford to collect and restore half dozen vintage Soviet cars and vacation in the Maldives and Thailand, although he said he prefers staying home. The poor villages here depend upon the generosity of wealthier farmers. Mr. Musharraf funded renovations to his village's statue of Lenin and a monument to locals who died in World War II, while Mr. Burdan paid to fix up his village's kindergarten. Mr. Musharraf employs 10 farm hands, 3 guards, and a cook who prepares meals for the workers. It's a lot for our acreage, but we try to preserve the jobs in the village, he said. One recent morning, a man dropped by Mr. Musharraf's farmyard office to cage a bucket of corn for his hens. It was a former collective boss. Now, I think this is very revealing in that at one point it looked like actually in Russia the state is getting involved, helping to replace outdated equipment, help the farmers with new technology, and the United States, I don't know to what extent we're helping the farmers replace old equipment and try to spur new innovation in the equipment itself. But even though I've been reading a lot about GPS on trackers and such, the idea of just corporatizing is not enough. I think we want to make sure that the smaller, innovative, quick-moving family businesses, they need to be nourished and grown. Okay, big isn't necessarily just the answer for everything, particularly in the United States. You want to have a competition and grow those smaller businesses. That's where the innovation comes from. That's where the good ideas come from, and that's where the hard work comes from, as compared to just getting a big farm through consolidation and acquisition and mergers, and then sitting on your laurels collecting government corporate welfare. That's not the way to go. So anyway, we're going to close up this particular session, and we're going to say, as usual, you guys be safe out there and keep your eyes and ears open. Have a good day. Bye.